It is the Resistance Report for May 4th, 2017. And let me begin by simply saying shame on the 217 Republicans who voted today to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And substitute what? Substitute basically nothing. Trump Care, and let's call it Trump Care, is basically just a repeal. It is not a replacement. It is a transfer from the sick and the poor to the wealthy and the healthy. And that's why it is morally repugnant. I could give you and will give you some analyses, and we'll talk about the politics, and we'll talk about everything else. But at the center of this is moral repugnance. You simply cannot have a society, and must not, and should not have a society in which we mark so-called progress by shifting resources and benefits from the poor and sick to the wealthy and healthy. The losers here today are up to 24 million Americans who may lose their health insurance because they cannot afford it, because they're not going to get subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, including millions of people who have what are called pre-existing conditions. That is, they are sick, they have chronic conditions, and many people who had access to expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, and now will lose that as well. And who are the winners? They are wealthy Americans and they are healthy Americans. Wealthy Americans who will get now a major tax cut. They will not any longer have to pick up the tab for the Affordable Care Act. And healthy Americans will not be mandated to get health insurance. Now, we don't know precisely how many people will be in the winning category and how many will be in the losing category. We don't have all of the details. Why? Because the Congressional Budget Office has not even scored, that is, provided the details, the consequences, the financial consequences, the coverage consequences of this bill. This bill was rushed through. Republicans who had screamed bloody murder years ago when the Affordable Care Act was put through without, they said, adequate vetting, hearings, thought, deliberation, studies. Well, whatever the inadequacy was for the Affordable Care Act, you can bet this move by Republicans in the House, without even a Congressional Budget Office estimate of the costs and the benefits and who gains and who loses and what the magnitude of the coverage loss is. Well, this is flying blind, folks. We know millions of people are going to be hurt. Millions of the most vulnerable members of society are going to be hurt. And the House Republicans basically said, we don't care. We don't even need the details. We don't even need the estimates. We're just going to fly blind. Today, the White House said, well, it was impossible for the Congressional Budget Office to do that kind of work. You can't make those estimates because there are too many variables. We don't know how many states will decide to seek waivers and opt out of the Affordable Care Act. That is pure and unadulterated rubbish. Because the Congressional Budget Office for years has made estimates based on different contingencies. They could say, well, if 10 states opt out, here are the consequences. If 30 states opt out, here are the consequences. That's what the Congressional Budget Office does. So don't for a moment believe the White House when it says we couldn't, or the Congressional Budget Office couldn't come up with any specific estimates. All we know for sure is that the poor and the sick are going to be hurt, and probably millions. House Republicans say they have protected people with pre-existing conditions. They have not. And by the way, how can they even say they have if they don't have any data from the Congressional Budget Office? You see the complete inconsistency there. People with heart conditions, or cancer, or MS, or any other chronic condition, any other pre-existing condition, they are going to be out of luck. Many of them depend on the Affordable Care Act. These people are not protected. Before the Affordable Care Act, some insurers even went so far as to charge higher premiums for women who were raped on the theory that they are higher risk. They're higher risk in terms of trauma and every other possible medical condition that might be associated with rape. Well, we're back to those days again. Insurers can charge under this Republican plan basically whatever they want to people with pre-existing conditions. Look, you've got to know, this is important background information, and it sets the context. And that's what we're all about here at the Resistance Report, providing context. We in the United States are the only modern political economy to have a healthcare system that is designed to avoid sick people. We are dependent, all of us, for health care on private for-profit health insurers. And private for-profit health insurers, how do they make money? They make money by avoiding high-risk, sick people that are going to be costly. They are looking for, and they're marketing to and advertising toward finding and signing up healthy people who are not going to cost very much money. They are the prizes. As a result, if you have a pre-existing condition, or if you are likely to be unhealthy in some way or be costly, you are going to be going into a high-risk pool. That's what we had before the Affordable Care Act. And if you're in a high-risk pool, no matter what the subsidies are, you're going to have a hard time affording health insurance. Now, Republicans say, well, they're going to subsidize more people with pre-existing conditions. That is utter baloney. Insurers will take the money. Obviously, they will take the money, and they will still charge sick people much higher premiums, or they'll avoid sick people altogether. You see, the most important aspect of the Affordable Care Act was to put sick people and healthy people together in the same insurance pool. That way, you didn't have higher premiums and discrimination against people with pre-existing conditions. That way, healthier people automatically subsidized the insurance costs of people with pre-existing health problems. Now, the only better alternative to the Affordable Care Act would be a single-payer system in which everybody is essentially in the one big insurance pool. That would not only be fair, it would also be more efficient, because it would mean that you didn't have so much money going into marketing and advertising to try to find healthy people and avoid sick people. And we know the administrative costs of Medicare are far lower than the administrative costs of private health insurers. You get Medicare for all. But the answer to the Affordable Care Act, any shortcoming it has, is not to throw it out, which is essentially what Republicans are doing. With Trump Care, make sure we use the term Trump Care, because I want to make sure that Donald Trump is associated with this travesty. It's not just a moral travesty, it's also going to be a travesty, because millions of people are going to lose their insurance, and some of them are going to die. And there is already, I guarantee you, the beginnings of a political firestorm on this one. Trump Care would also allow states to ignore the Affordable Care Act's basic benefits. Now that includes maternity care. In fact, today there were two major assaults on women's health. Not only Trump Care, but also Trump's so-called religious freedom executive order. Did you get that? Now, this is different from Trump Care. It's a direct attack on women's access to birth control. After rescinding the Obama regulation prohibiting states from barring qualified providers like Planned Parenthood from the Title X family planning program, today's order, signed by Donald Trump, goes even further by permitting employers to exclude coverage of contraceptives in their health plans, thereby depriving countless women of basic health care. Today's double blow to women's health is not just a blow to women's health, it's a blow to all of us. Trump and the Republicans are moving us closer to the dystopia of The Handmaid's Tale. Now, Paul Ryan today said that the vote on Trump Care was about fulfilling a promise the GOP made to voters. That is another piece of first-class baloney. Yes, true, Republicans did tell Republican voters that they would do everything they could to repeal Obamacare. They've been saying that for years. But the only reason Republican voters were so insistent on getting rid of Obamacare is that Republicans have been lying to Republican voters for years about Obamacare. Originally, they said it wouldn't work. It couldn't conceivably work. It would bankrupt America. Remember? And then they said millions of Americans would actually lose their health insurance under Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. Do you remember? All of those lies were proven false. But it didn't matter, because by then, Republicans and Republican leaders had stirred up a hornet's nest. Lie after lie after lie. Now they are saying, well, you couldn't have gone on with the Affordable Care Act because it was unsustainable. The premiums were going up and insurers were dropping out. Well, you know why premiums were going up and insurers were dropping out? Because Republicans had not allowed any, even minor reforms in the Affordable Care Act. And in recent months, they have kept things so uncertain for insurers that insurers couldn't even plan for the future. They're also lying about their real motive here. Paul Ryan and Trump and Republicans are doing this because their patrons want lower taxes. They're wealthy patrons who supported their elections. Their wealthy patrons want a tax cut. They don't like the fact that Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, increased their taxes. That's what this is all about, folks. They want to get back some $600 billion a year. It's all about greed. Again, from the poor and sick to the wealthy and healthy. And if you permit me to talk just a little bit about basic values. A value like patriotism. Donald Trump talks a lot about patriotism. Republicans talk a lot about patriotism. They think patriotism is all about exclusion. You know, put up walls, keep them out, whoever them are. Well, that's not what patriotism is really about. Patriotism is about sacrificing for the common good. Patriotism is about participating in the public good. People without children, they pay taxes for public schools. Why do they do that? Because they understand public schools are a common good. They are necessary. People who live close to their work, they pay taxes for better roads and bridges for people that have to commute an hour to work. Why do they do that? Because they understand that that is in the public good, in the common good. They pay for parks, even though they don't use parks, because they know that's part of the common good. Under the Affordable Care Act, healthier and wealthier Americans pay a little bit more for the common good, so that the poorer and the sicker have access to health care. Donald Trump and his Republican enablers, they are not real patriots. They sound like patriots. They wave the flag. But when it comes to actually taking responsibility for fellow citizens and human beings, no, they're not patriots. In fact, Congress even put a provision in Trump Care that allows them to be exempted from Trump Care. And congressional staffs. If it's not good enough for Congress and their staffs, how can they expect the American people to accept this? They don't even think we're citizens with obligations to one another. They think we're consumers. Basically, that's their view. The art of the deal. We're just a bunch of individual consumers out for ourselves, out to get the best possible deal. So what do we do now? The answer is, we fight. House Republicans who voted for this travesty will rue the day they did today. Senate Republicans who will join them will also regret, because we are going to do everything, you and I and millions of other people are going to do everything we possibly can to make sure they are not re-elected. Now, you've got to understand what happens next. In order to become law, Trump Care has to go through 4 additional steps. First, it's got to go to the Senate. The Senate has got to pass some sort of amended version. The Senate's not going to go along exactly with what the House did. Already, Republican senators are grumbling, so there will be something different. And then it has to go to a conference committee of the House and the Senate to hammer out the differences. And then it goes back to the House for another vote. That conference committee bill goes back to the House for another vote, and then it goes to the Senate for another vote. That's how it gets through. So there is time to stop it. And I hope you are there every step of the way as Trump Care collapses of its own weight, of its own moral repugnance. Now here's what you can do specifically. There are 11 days of congressional recess starting today. In fact, at this very moment, your representative is very likely to be in a plane heading home. Wouldn't it be nice if you were there to welcome him or her at the airport? But you don't even have to go that far. Over the next week, they will be holding fundraisers, and they're going to be working out of their district offices. Now, as of today, only 5 members of Congress have scheduled town halls over the next 11 days of congressional recess. First, call them publicly to have a town hall and express your concern, complain. If they don't, make sure, particularly Republicans who voted for Trump Care, they have to explain their vote. If they won't, show up at their district office and you give them very clear feedback on how you feel about their vote. So that when these members are forced to vote again on Trump Care, as you understand they will have to, they know what they are in for. Now, to help you make your voice and your voices very loud and very clear over the next 11 days, IndivisibleGuy.com has put together an updated Trump Care resources webpage. And please make use of it. In fact, one of the things you can do right after the resistance report tonight, immediately following the resistance report tonight, We will be posting a Facebook Live event by indivisibleguide.com. It's called Payback Recess Planning Event. It's a payback recess planning event. And here it is, Payback Recess Planning. It's on Facebook.com/indivisibleguide, and you will find this Facebook Live event there, starting at 5:30 Pacific Time, 8:30 Eastern Time, every time in between. It is vitally important that we hold House members who voted for this accountable. It's vitally important that we continue to give Democrats the courage of their conviction and their backbones. It's vitally important that we make sure that senators, Republican senators, and any wavering Democratic senator not give in to this moral repugnance. It's critically important now for all of us, as we have repeatedly over the months since Election Day, to stand up and make our voices heard loudly and clearly and unambiguously. Your questions. Angie Panel, doesn't the Religious Freedom Bill violate the separation of church and state? Angie, it's not a bill. It was an executive order that was signed today by Donald Trump, instructing various departments to do various things. It's not an act of Congress. But there is a serious question. You are absolutely right about whether it violates, here, remember, keep your Constitution close by, whether it violates the First Amendment, which prohibits the government from interfering with the practice of religion or establishing any official religion. And there ought to be and will be, I expect, some litigation about this. Tisha Laggett, why aren't there stricter rules about standards for bills and minimum cost-benefit assessment, Congressional Budget Office scoring required to even be heard? Is there no measure in place to ensure that legislation is not harmful for or negligent of citizens? Tisha, no, unfortunately. And here again, I want to bring back something very painful but real to all of you, and that is when you have one party, and I'm talking particularly about the Republican Party, in control of both houses of Congress and the presidency, basically they can thumb their nose at whatever rule comes up. Two more. Rox Marie, what can we do to fight the American Health Care Act in the Senate if our senators are already against it? Well, if your senators are already against it, then you can help those in other states with senators who are wavering or likely to vote for it. And there are a lot of groups around. I just want to give you again, swingleft.org, sisterdistrict.com. You can find other groups and obviously other Indivisible Guide groups. There are now 6,000 Indivisible Guide groups, at least 2 in every congressional district, many in every state, including red states. Find them, help them, support them, push their senators. Sumi Key, I think that's how you pronounce it. We need an additional branch in the government, the People's Branch, where we the people have a direct say and vote in the final policies before they are made into law. Just because something passes in the House and Senate doesn't mean it is what the people want. The people have a right to vote directly. What are your thoughts? Well, Simi, we have a democratic form of government. We don't have a direct democracy. We have a form of government in which we elect representatives. And the problem is Not that we don't have direct democracy. The real problem, actually, if you want to know the truth, is that we have so many, almost half of Americans don't even bother voting. And a lot of Americans don't even know what's at stake. We have got to create, and maybe the silver lining on today and the Trump administration in general is that more and more Americans are becoming awake and awakening to the cost of not being actively involved, the cost of not knowing what is going on. So direct democracy, I don't know. In fact, I could think of reasons why that might be quite dangerous. Can you imagine an internet app where you could just vote on anything without even knowing much about it? No. I want us to have representatives and senators and a president and state legislators as well and governors who are intelligent, who care about the public, who care about the common good, who are leaders. 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago exactly, I had the privilege of being an intern in Washington working for Senator Robert Kennedy. I can tell you how excited and ennobled I felt by being an intern. I ran his signature machine. I did nothing, but I was around somebody who cared deeply, who I am sure, had he become president and not been assassinated in 1968, would have changed the course of America. We need that quality of person in office, and you have a responsibility to push our representatives and senators in that direction and make sure we do have a government we can be proud of once again. That is the end of tonight's Resistance Report. I'm going to take a little bit of time off. I need it. If members of Congress can take a recess, I can take a recess. So I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Be well.